It's over.
It's over.
What's going on, folks? I've seen every episode of Squid Game Season 3, so today we're going to discuss it. I'd love to see your thoughts down below. Did this season pay off expectations? So at the end of Season 2, we saw Player 456 and friends try to stage a coup, go after the people responsible for everything, and alas, that kind of failed. Everything goes back to the way it was at the beginning of Season 3, and that's not a spoiler, that's the first scene, right? We have our characters who are just devastated that this didn't work, but on the other side of things, you have a bunch of people that are happy because, oh, they just went and died, and so now that's less people on their side. The games will continue, and thus we have our basis for Season 3. Player 456, pure devastation. That first episode, he's just kind of sitting there with the handcuff on. He doesn't even get up to vote. Everything is meaningless and pointless for those first few scenes, and I found that to be kind of gut-wrenching. Just this big plan that he's been working on throughout this set of games ultimately ended in sadness, devastation, destruction, and death, which is how the Squid Games are going to end in general. We know that is coming, but how are they going to go about that in this season? Who ultimately wins, but are you going to continue to get those really gut-wrenching scenes? And one thing I'll give it up to Season 3 for is delivering on some absolutely heartbreaking moments. I mean, my God. We're cranking the heartbreak up to 11, and we experienced that a little bit in Season 2, but way more so, I believe, this time around. And while there aren't as many games in Season 3, we don't get the diversity of so many different things that we get to take part in. The games themselves, pretty brutal. I'm going to chalk it up to Episode 2, just continuing to deliver heartbreaking moment after heartbreaking moment, and to see these characters literally going after each other, trying to kill each other, and then the other side just trying to survive. But if you don't get a kill in this game, you die anyway, and so you either have to murder or be murdered. So yeah, that's the Squid Games. And so we as an audience are feeling the inevitability, knowing this is the final season, the gruesome, harrowing, and grueling events that take place on screen, one thing after the next. Characters that we learned to care about and started to get to know a little bit in Season 2, and we know it's not going to end well for most of them, but I will say almost every death, whether it came in the games or not, was fairly satisfying. And then on the other side of things, you have the front man and all of these, the Purge-style rich folk that are sitting and watching the games happen. Now, we get a much bigger look at that this time around, and I felt like there was a little bit of a cartoonish element to those characters. The dialogue was very over the top, their conversations. You expect them to be snarky and kind of disgusting at times, male characters hitting on female characters, that kind of thing, to where the more they talked, the more you hated them, which is absolutely the intent of the writers, but I did feel as if their dialogue was just a little too cartoonish for what was happening metaphorically on the other side of the glass. And that's the point. They are in charge of how these games go. They have characters that they are rooting for. And at one point, and this, I wouldn't consider this a spoiler, there is a pregnant competitor. Thus, we know what pregnancy leads to. There's going to be a baby. And the way that they handle this baby, turning it into a character in the games, and essentially giving the responsibility of the infant to 1, 2, or 3 of our players, and trying to assure its survival, is haunting to watch. And that just added a new dynamic. And one thing I loved about really Season 2, but Season 3 as well, is you have such a wide range of ages here. You have our older character, and she's kind of like that motherly figure of everyone, not just her son. But there was a fantastic moment between her and her son a few episodes in, and then kind of her protective instincts of that child and our young mother, and where that ultimately leads us. My God. And again, like I said earlier, whether these characters get taken out by the games, by themselves, or by the guards, it is so haunting. Like, I'm still thinking about some of my favorite characters, how they went out in this season. And the big game in the beginning that lasts 2 episodes, basically this hide and hide and seek. I can't remember the name of the game. We've built up so many dynamics, characters that are pissed at one another. Obviously, 4, 5, 6, he's got a lot of enemies. And this is the point of no return for him because he's just straight-faced throughout that first episode. And then there's a little bit of a revenge factor to him. So he knows he can't go big or go home just yet. So he's, trying to take out some revenge on some of the actual players in the game. And maybe one or two that betrayed him. We saw that in season 2. That was an excellent confrontation. But that's what episode 2 was all about. Confrontations across the board to where that emotional level of significance that they conveyed to us in season 2, all of it comes to a head in that first game that we get to see. And my God, man. And then we get another game, one that looks, or at least feels on its surface like, not easy to survive, but that feels a little easier than the last few games. But once it starts, and once you're on that beam, and that rope, it's not a rope, it's just, there's a level of fear that I was feeling for each individual character. And this is one of those games, it just takes a ton of people out across the board. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is a lot harder than it seemed on its surface. It ended up being obviously not the most complex game that we've seen, but it ended up being one that got rid of plenty of characters, and that was brutal, man. So, while Season 3 doesn't hold the best games we've seen, the most complex moments between characters, all of these emotions that were almost to their boiling point in Season 2, you start to see that culminate in Season 3, and these characters that we've learned to care about, that we've learned to love, on the other side of things, those that we have learned to hate, get their just desserts. Well, not all of them.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Can I go back to the baby? A lot of people are wanting to take the baby out. And they're like, why does this thing deserve a share of our money? This little child. You're raising so many ethical questions in that moment, and then adding in this element, these protective instincts of the characters that wants to care for her. But admittedly, the social commentary of this season, very sharp, eloquently displayed when it needed to be. Some of the ideas, they do feel a little repetitive, especially when you compare the end of Season 3 to the end of Season 1. I'm not saying there's similarities with how it goes, but the ethical dilemma and the questions that are raised. But you also have a little bit of that backstory for the front man. You start to get some flashbacks in that final, or I'd say the final 2 episodes, that do reveal a little bit about his past. And then once people are aware of who he is, I'm not going to say who, that takes it up another level. And so not only are you getting one side of things in the competitors, you're seeing a lot across the glass of those that are in charge. And again, those moments were a little over the top, which I didn't love, but I understand why they did that. But then there's that idea of inevitability that starts to creep in with this final season, to where ultimately what has to happen, and you're bracing for that. But once you get it, I could very easily see why some people would be underwhelmed by this finale, because ultimately, there are only a handful of ways this could end, and the route that they choose, I'm not sure if that's the route that everyone's going to love. I'm actually very sure that is a route that's going to cause some controversy. Now, for me, I count that as taking a risk, making a swing that obviously is not going to make everyone feel fulfilled, but that's a choice that I found to be pretty bold. You also have one of our guards who is trying to take matters into her own hands. So there's an A plot, and then there's a B plot, but then you have the C plot of those that are looking for this island. We're trying to wrap up that story as well. And every time we cut back to that, we went off the island, away from the games, away from our characters that we've come to care about, and to those that have a way better chance of survival. Admittedly, you kind of have to have characters like that. But every time we would cut to that, I was thinking, I kind of just want to go back. I kind of just want to go back to, keep it more secluded, keep our mind focused on one thing as opposed to 3 even 2 would have been a bit better than ultimately what somewhat becomes the focus in like episodes 3 and 4, going away from the island, because you've got a lot of stories to wrap up here. And they do a nice job of wrapping them up. That's not what I'm saying. But when you have an A, B, and C plot, it's a little bit of a balance, and it's a tougher balance to pull off. And the other 2 seasons didn't really have that as much as they do in this season. That being said, only 6 episodes. Yeah, it's a lot shorter of a travel to round the bases and go home. Ultimately, we get home, but it's a rough journey to get there, man. Not a bad way. I just mean lots of death. What Squid Games does best is when it puts humanity on display, the good and the bad, the dark caverns of where we travel, thematically, but really exploring the minds of these individuals. They do a nice job of that, and those moments that you're looking for satisfaction, one way or the other, they are there. I'm curious to see what the reception is like. I need to know down below. Is this a satisfying conclusion? I review everything I can on Netflix, so if you want to follow that journey, subscribe, hit that like, and we'll be back for more. I want to talk spoilers. Do you want to see that? Let me know. And we might rank the seasons as well. And while this season begins to lose steam at a point, the darkness and visceral nature of the storytelling should provide fans a level of entertainment that so many will be craving. The inevitability of where we are headed is understandably upsetting, but the arrival to this conclusion is thrilling and satisfying. It manages to overcome some of its cartoonish villains and provide a handful of gut-wrenching moments that exemplify what Squid Game ultimately is. And that's kind of dark and depressing. But we know that. It's like the Hunger Games. Also, I think we're getting an American remake. Is that something you all want to see? I'm curious. I just don't know. All right, thanks for watching. I'll be back. I have to review The Bear Season 4, but maybe with a spoiler review.